Hi, everybody. Welcome to English Digest. I'm Stephanie.
And I'm Tom. It's our travel unit. It's also our all-English lecture for today. So we're going to be giving the Chinese teacher a bit of a break today. And I suppose since it is an all-English lecture, we should kind of slow down a little bit to make sure you can understand everything that we say. And unfortunately, though, this article is about a town in Europe whose native language is not English, so we are going to be talking about some of the sites there and expressed in their language. But that's okay. This is probably a 99.99% all-English lecture.
You know, actually, there isn't even one word in here that you need to say in French or Dutch, so we're okay. I have been there. I was there as a college student, pretty young girl. And, yeah, there's some fun things to see. I wasn't there very long, but long enough to at least see some of the most famous sites and eat some of their delicious food. We'll talk about that in a minute. Right now, we're going to read through today's unit. Brussels, Belgium, is one of Europe's oddest places. A mostly French-speaking city surrounded by a Dutch-speaking region. It's a melting pot of different languages and cultures. Many tourists skip over this charming city in a rush to reach Amsterdam or Paris. However, stick around for more than a day, and you'll find that it's much more than just another name on the map. While much smaller than other European capitals, Brussels is by no means unimportant. This city of 1.2 million people serves as the headquarters for several international organizations, including NATO and the European Union, EU. As a result, you'll often find more politicians and journalists here than anywhere else in the world. While politics may motivate many visits to Brussels, others come here for the city's amazing architecture. Wander the capital's historic center, a maze of winding medieval streets, and marvel at its crown jewel, the Grand Place. Named a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1998, this square of elaborate merchant houses stuns tourists and locals alike. This is especially true during the flower carpet, when artists decorate the plaza with nearly 1 million fresh blossoms. Other parts of the city show Brussels' unique sense of humor. The Mannequin Piss is one funny example. It's a 61-centimeter bronze statue of a little boy peeing into a fountain. This little guy is one of the country's most widely loved attractions. You'll find him in shop windows, on postcards, and even shaped into chocolate. With impressive architecture and European charm, there's more than enough in Brussels to make the city well worth a visit.
All right, it's time to discuss the contents of today's lesson. We're going to Europe in today's program, and more specifically, we're going to Brussels, which of course is in the country of Belgium. So Brussels, a brief guide to Belgium's charming capital. Oh, it's so charming, it's so attractive. You're going to have such a great time when you go there. And yes, indeed, you might go to other parts of Europe as well, but hey, maybe Brussels is a place you might consider if you've already been to Amsterdam or Paris or London or Madrid or Rome or wherever. So here we go. Brussels, Belgium is one of Europe's oddest places. Interesting way to start the article. We're describing Brussels as being an odd place. Odd just means kind of strange, kind of unusual. It's a place that you're not going to find very often.
Yeah, I was trying to remember back when I went. I think I stayed for one night, maybe 2 days. But I saw the major sites, I think. It's not very big. And it's so darn close to the other European countries that it's a shame if you don't kind of go for at least a day and see what's cool about Brussels, Belgium. So it's a mostly French-speaking city surrounded by a Dutch-speaking region. So it's a kind of a melting pot of different languages and cultures. Of course, nowadays there are many people from the Middle East who have settled there as well. So we've really got a mix of people. That's what a melting pot means. I have to say, when I was there, I don't think I talked to any of the vendors who spoke Dutch. Most of the people I ran into, and you have to talk to people if you're over there, and the English wasn't very good when I was in college. Yeah, most everyone spoke French. So you're okay if you can speak French. Nowadays, though, there are a lot of English speakers. So don't be afraid to go over to Brussels and see what it's like. It's really cool.
You might be able to get by with Mandarin Chinese because of all the mainland tourists going all over Europe nowadays. And if you're smart in business, you're going to learn Mandarin Chinese to cater to those tourists.
Yeah, I have to say, when I was in Paris 2 years ago, I was shocked at the number of Chinese immigrants who were working in chocolate stores and things like that. Their English was very good.
Yeah, but we can't say that English is unnecessary if you go there because we'd be out of a job, wouldn't we? So, yes, keep studying your English here. But in any case here, yes, it's a melting pot. It's got all sorts of different languages, different cultures. And many tourists just simply skip over this charming city in a rush to reach Amsterdam or Paris, which are getting overrun with tourists. I think I read somewhere that Amsterdam is considering limits or taxes on tourists because they just have too many of them coming in. I'm sure the same is true with Paris as well. But a lot of people say, hey, I'm here in Europe. I've got to go to Amsterdam. I've got to go to Paris to see the Champs-Élysées or the Eiffel Tower. Who needs to go to Brussels? They just skip over this charming city because they're too concerned about going someplace else.
I wanted to mention skip over is great. It's a verb phrase, but you could just say many tourists skip this charming city as well. So, yeah. Well, you skipped to talk about skipping class. I skipped my lesson tonight. So, yeah, it's a shame because it's a really cute little city. It's not that small, but in comparison to some of these other capital cities, it is. So, like Tom said, a lot of people just skip it because they're in a rush, in a hurry to go to Amsterdam or Paris. And the next sentence says, however, stick around for more than a day, and you'll find that it's much more than just another name on the map. Yeah, I think at the very minimum, you might try a night, staying there so you'd have a day, a night, a day. It's pretty easy to travel around Europe. It doesn't take, 3 days in a car to get somewhere anymore. You just take a quick train and you're there. So if you stick around, it just means you stay in place. Maybe you're having a party and one of your friends comes up and says, yeah, I got to get going. But it's kind of early and you're like, oh, come on, please just stick around for the dinner. Maybe they have something they have to get to. Can't you just stick around for the movie and then you can go? So to stick around just means to stay in place.
Yep, so stick around, just stay there for more than a day, and you'll find that it's much more than just another name on the map. It's just a place that you should stop at and stick around and don't skip over it. It's not just the name of a place on a map. We often say that if it's just a name on a map, then it's not really important.
Yeah, it's true.
Don't bother going there. It's not worth your time, etc. But maybe it is worth your time. And here in the next paragraph it says, while much smaller than other European capitals, Brussels is by no means unimportant. So here the phrase by no means just means not at all. Brussels is not at all unimportant. It certainly is an important city. Interesting here because we're using a double negative here.
Yeah.
It is by no means unimportant. It is not important, basically, which means it is important, but this is an interesting way to phrase this, a different way of expressing this idea. It is by no means unimportant. It is not at all unimportant.
Yeah, it's kind of one of those weird idioms that's a double negative. I could say, you are by no means forced into doing something you don't want to do. Maybe you by no means have to eat that fish eye, which I don't like, guys. I don't like eating the fish eyes here.
Weird.
You by no means have to eat the fish eye if it really grosses you out. it does. I don't really like those eyeballs. But yeah, it's by no means unimportant. Actually, it's quite important and has been gaining importance, especially after the European countries formed the EU many decades ago. When I went there, there was no EU, but now, yeah, the EU is quite important. It's sort of the government that oversees all of the European countries together. That's what Brexit was about. A lot of the British people wanted to get out of the EU because they were losing their freedom to govern their own country because Brussels would come up with new laws, new regulations. So you've got this city of 1.2 million people. And if you serve as something, that means that's your function. So it serves as the headquarters. I wanted to mention, guys, headquarters is always plural. Please don't say headquarter. No, there's no such word. For example, in New York City, I worked for a pharmaceutical company called Pfizer. It's the world's largest pharmaceutical company. The headquarters were located on 42nd Street on the east side. So they also have Nato there, which is a really big group of countries that have promised and pledged to defend each other. For example, if a bad country, comes and attacks one of the countries in NATO, I know the U.S. has pledged to defend them against the evil country that actually has attacked them.
Yeah, Brussels is the headquarters for NATO and for the EU. And as a result, because of this, you'll often find more politicians and journalists here than anywhere else in the world. You'll see them hanging out with lots of cameras hanging around their necks. And, of course, there'll be lots of politicians going all over the place, promising to do things and then not fulfilling those promises. So, yes, indeed, you'll find those politicians and journalists all over the place. If you hate those kinds of people, well, then maybe you should stay away from Brussels. But I'm sure they probably hang out in a certain area of the city and will leave you alone as a tourist.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to be a politician or a journalist in today's world. They're hated by a lot of people for good reason, but we'll move on. Next paragraph starts with, while politics may motivate many visits to Brussels, others come here for the city's amazing architecture. It's pretty beautiful there, truly. So maybe you really are into politics and you feel like, ooh, I want to go there and see what it's like. Maybe you can even sit in on a meeting. Perhaps not a NATO meeting, but maybe there are EU meetings that you could sit in on. I don't know. But if you're motivated to do something, guys, it just means there's some sort of reason that you have that's making you do something or getting you excited about something. Motivate is the verb form. Motivation is the noun form. What was your motivation for writing this novel, Tom? Oh, I watched my best friend go through a really tough experience, and that gave me some ideas, and it motivated me to put that story down on paper. A lot of things can motivate you. I find that music motivates me a lot. If I listen to the right music, it makes me want to get up and be more busy and get something done. Or if I'm listening to sad songs, it kind of causes me to cry. That's bad motivation. But yeah, there are a lot of reasons to visit Brussels. We're going to talk about the architecture, though, after we take this quick break. The architecture, the style of the buildings there. Oh, so beautiful.
Okay, so again, we're talking about Brussels, Belgium. It's a pretty cool place. It's not some place you should skip over on your way to Amsterdam or Paris. You should consider sticking around there and checking it out. And we did mention also that Brussels is the headquarters for lots of international organizations like NATO and the EU. So, of course, lots of people go there because they're politicians or diplomats or whatever. So here it says, politics may motivate lots of people to visit Brussels. Other people come to Brussels for the city's amazing architecture. So here, they come here for this thing. That's
for
the
something,
reason.
yeah.
Yep, that's why they are traveling to Brussels, because they've heard that, hey, there are some great buildings in Brussels. I want to go and check them out. Maybe do some sketches or something like that, or be inspired by those buildings to become an architect myself or something like that. Who knows? But in any case, they're going there to check out the architecture. Please don't add an S to that. We're not talking about the individual works of architecture there. We're talking about the general style of buildings in the city overall, okay, the architecture there, meaning all the buildings together from different periods of European history.
Although you could say, I like the architecture of this building, but you can't say, oh, I like the architectures that you can see on this street. No! You like the buildings, the style of the buildings. Architecture includes the process of planning, designing, and building those buildings. If you're someone who's in the business, you're called an architect, right? And you draw up those cool plans that are called blueprints. I wonder if they still use that special paper, yeah. Now that we have all these computer software programs, we might be, behind the times, which means we don't know if they're still using blueprints. But when all the time until I moved out here to Taiwan, I was seeing blueprints that architects would use. So yeah, the architecture there in Brussels is quite lovely. And if you're into that or you just love beautiful buildings, go. Check it out. You're going to wander the capital's historic center. If you wander around, guys, you're just kind of walking with no real goal in mind. Maybe you just want to, take it easy. When people wander, they're typically not going directly to some tourist attraction to see it quickly and mark it off their list. They're enjoying the day. They're walking kind of slowly. It's kind of a nice feeling to wander around.
Yep, wander around and marvel at those various things there. It's a maze of winding medieval streets.
Cool.
A maze, of course, is a place that you could get lost inside. They're usually made out of bushes and you walk in. But in this particular case, because the city's streets were designed and built during the medieval period of history, they kind of go all over the place. And unless you have a good sense of direction, you're probably going to get lost. You'll probably have to rely on your GPS or something to find your way back to your hotel. So those streets are winding. They go in all sorts of directions. Just like the streets in Wanhua, to me, they kind of wind all over the place.
Do. Yeah.
I always get lost every time I go down to Wanhua. And in this particular case, it's a maze of streets. So again, you might get lost down there. But while you're wandering around there, you could marvel at the crown jewel of Brussels, the Grand Place, which was named a UNESCO World Heritage Site way back in 1998. So, yes, it's the crown jewel, the really greatest tourist attraction that is there, especially if it's something that's very precious, very special, and that's the Grand Place. If you go to Brussels and you don't go to the Grand Place, you haven't been to Brussels.
Yeah, now this one I can tell you the French is Le Grand Place. So, Le Grand Place is where you might want to go check out some of the beautiful architecture. Yeah, the streets are definitely not laid out like north, south, east, west. It's a lot more confusing. It's like the southern part of New York City is like that too. But if you get past like, a certain street in New York, it's very easy to find your way. It's north, south, east, west, very, very clear. But those areas where the streets wind back and forth, I get turned around. I lose my sense of direction, meaning I can't tell what's north or south or east or west. This particular crown jewel has nothing to do with jewels like diamonds and rubies and sapphires. As Tom said, it's just a term we use to talk about a place or maybe an attraction's best feature, right? So it's the crown jewel. It was named a UNESCO World Heritage Site back in 1998, meaning it's considered one of the most precious places on the planet Earth that, of course, is man-made. And we want to take care of it. We want to preserve it so nothing happens to it. It stays in good shape.
This square of elaborate merchant houses stuns tourists and locals alike. So it's a square, it's a plaza, it's the middle of the city, and it's got these houses that are merchant houses. I guess that's where merchants live or used to live.
We don't call them merchants anymore, do we? We just say vendors.
Okay, sounds fair enough.
Or a salesperson, someone who's selling something.
Yep, and they're very elaborate, which means they've got lots of details. Of course, if you go visit the temples in Taiwan, they are very elaborate as well. Lots of carvings of dragons and deities and stuff like that. Very elaborate. That's the adjective here. Elaborate is the verb. Well, can you give me some details about your business plan? Can you elaborate? But here, elaborate is the adjective with lots of details.
Yeah, notice that the pronunciation is indeed different, guys. Make sure you get that right. Elaborate, verb, elaborate, adjective. Okay, so yeah, it's very stunning to the people who go and check it out. If you're stunned by something shocking to you, your mouth kind of, your jaw drops. We'll often use that expression. You're either stunned in a good way or maybe shocked in a bad way. If you get bad news, you can be stunned by something. But it is quite lovely. This is especially true during a particular time of the year when they have something called the flower carpet. I wasn't lucky enough to be there during the flower carpet. This is when artists decorate the plaza or plaza. You can pronounce it either way. I say plaza. When they decorate everything with lots of fresh blossoms. So it's kind of like in California, we have the Rose Parade during I think it's centered around a football game, college football championship. But all of the floats, those vehicles are all decorated with flowers. It's beautiful. I love when they just use real flowers to decorate a place. This is the time that you want to go. A blossom is the flower portion that has opened up either on a bush. Maybe it's a flower bush or a tree like cherry blossoms that we have here and in Japan that are quite lovely. The bloom is before that flower opens, right? And a bloom can be a noun or a verb. But if it's already opened, we typically will use blossom before bloom.
Yep, like cherry blossoms or apple blossoms or peach blossoms or plum blossoms, which are common here in Taiwan. Now, other parts of the city show Brussels' unique sense of humor. Yes, people from Belgium have a unique sense of humor. They like to make people laugh. We've got something called the Mannequin Piss. I hope I said that right. Mannequin, I suppose, that's like a model that is peeing. It's a 61-centimeter bronze statue of a little boy peeing into a fountain. Oh, isn't that amazing? Boy, do I want to go see that. Okay, it's a statue, which is basically a work of art that's three-dimensional in the form of a person.
I think he has been made out of either marble or granite, something, a very hard rock. Yeah, he's not as big as I thought he would be. He's so famous in Europe, though. And every store, every tourist store at least, that you go in Belgium always has postcards or images of him. Maybe you could buy a little bell. It's in the shape of Mannequin Piss. It's just kind of cute. He's just a little guy. Maybe he's 7 or 8. He's a little adorable thing. So statue is just an image of either a person, maybe an animal. Could be a horse, that someone makes a statue of a beautiful horse and puts it in a garden or a park. We have statues here in Taiwan.
Or in my hometown, someone made a statue of a crapping dog based on the peeing boy. So they thought, hey, let's make a statue of a dog taking a dump. That would be a tourist attraction. Needless to say...
Explain what taking a dump or crapping is, because those are slang terms.
Yeah, I think that would be cool.
Just going to the bathroom, number 2.
I wish there were such a statue somewhere in the world.
Oh, you're making that up?
I'm making it up, unfortunately. I wish it were true, but for a lot of people with kind of a scatological sense of humor, then maybe this particular fountain would be the thing for you.
And scatological means?
Having to do with crapping or peeing and stuff like that.
Yeah, if you go see a lot of American movies, comedies that are rated R, they usually have lots of jokes that boys would like, I think, more than girls, about, going to the bathroom, using the toilet, something about their body parts, that kind of stuff.
Or farting. That would be pretty cool to have as a fountain as well. But in any case, this little guy is one of the country's most widely loved attractions.
It's true.
And as you said, you'll find him in shop windows, on postcards, and even shaped into chocolate. Oh,
True.
I can't wait to bite into a piece of chocolate that's in the shape of a pissing boy. I've bit into pieces of chocolate in the shape of the Easter bunny,
The rabbit.
for Easter,
sure.
but this is kind of new here. A boy in the shape, or a piece of chocolate in the shape of a boy, having a piss, having a tinkle in a fountain in the middle of the city. Boy, that's something I'd really like to eat.
Europe is filled with cities that depend on a lot of tourists coming because they make a lot of money off tourism. And so you'll see lots of famous tourist attractions that are shaped into candy or chocolate or cookies or cakes. Yeah, I was thinking of Paris. There are so many little tourist trinkets, little things you can buy as souvenirs that have the Eiffel Tower on it. Or London, it's fairly new. It wasn't there when I was in college, but now they have the London Eye. That's a Ferris wheel that's really big. A lot of tourist trinkets or souvenirs will be out of that shape. So all of these European countries, they really depend on tourism. So when bad things happen, like terrorist attacks, they're terrible for the economy because it scares foreigners who don't want to go visit. So yeah, just got to take your chances, I guess, if you go anywhere in the world. You could have something bad happen to you. That's life.
Be careful. So, indeed, there are a lot of attractions in Brussels. So, with impressive architecture and European charm, there's more than enough in Brussels to make the city well worth a visit. So, yes, indeed, we're trying to encourage you to go visit Brussels on your next trip to Europe. If you've never been there before, you probably won't go there. You'll probably be too busy going to other major attractions like Paris or Amsterdam. But, maybe on your second or third trip, you ought to consider stopping in Brussels and checking it out. Maybe you can have some Belgian waffles. Yes. Or some chocolate.
Or some pommes frites, which just means really fat, tasty French fries.
I've even had people tell me that Belgian beer is better than German beer, of all things. So check it out there if you're into that sort of thing. So there you go. There's Brussels in Belgium. Enjoy your trip there in case you go. Okay, that brings us to the end of our explanation for today. Thank you so much for joining us, and please join us again next time for another edition of our program. From all of us here at English Digest, I'm Tom.
I'm Stephanie.
Goodbye.
See ya.